We're going to create a function that will reverse a linked list. And I will simplify the code for this function using some animations so that you're able to visualize and, most importantly, understand how the code works. I will also show you the code and explain it as we continue to build the linked list project. This video will show you the reverse linked list function to reverse a linked list. It is very easy, and after this video you'll be able to write a reverse linked list function. We will cover reversing a linked list, and I will show you what the code does using some animation. And after I show you what the code does using some animation, I will show you the complete code for the function in our linked list project in this video. The code of this video is to create a function that we will call on our linked list and have it print out the original linked list in reverse. To create the reverse linked list function, we create a void function which will call another function, and this function will only take in the head as argument. Going to this second function, which is also a void function, which takes in a node pointer as argument. The idea behind this function is to adjust the links in the linked list and not the actual values in the nodes. And so to travel through the linked list and to keep track of the nodes we visit, we'll create a few pointers. First being the current pointer, the second one being the previous pointer, which will initialize to null, and finally we will create the next pointer. And finally we'll create the next pointer and name it next PTR. And now that we've declared our nodes, we can move on to set the current pointer to the pointed PTR, which is pointing to the head of the node, since the head pointer was passed in as argument to the function. The while loop will check if the current pointer is not pointing to null, and if it is pointing to something, like in our example, we enter the while loop. In the while loop, we set the next pointer we declared to point at the current node's next pointer, which is just the next node in the linked list, and set the current node next pointer and to point at the previous node, which is just pointing to null as we declared it. We set the current node's next pointer to point at the previous pointer, which is just pointing to null as we declared it. After that, we advance the previous pointer to point at the current node pointer. After that, we advance the previous node pointer to point at the current node pointer, which is the current node. Then advance the current node pointer to point at the next node pointer, which is at the next node. Since the current node pointer is not pointing to null, we are still in the while loop, and we repeat the same steps until the node with the value of 11. When we set the next pointer to the current node's next pointer, and in this case the next pointer will be pointing to null, and we continue to set the current next pointer to point at the previous node's pointer, which is the node with the value of 7, and set the previous pointer to the current node pointer, and then advance the current node pointer to point at the next node, which is already pointing at null. Therefore, it will also point at null, and so the current node pointer is pointing at null. We can now exit the while loop to execute the following statements, which is just to set the head node pointer to point at the previous node, which is the last node in the original linked list, but will be the first node in the newly reversed linked list. Then finally, we will print the resulting linked list using the print function we created in the previous videos. So if we have a linked list, we can call our reverse linked list function, and it will reverse and print out the resulting linked list. And now we can move on to the actual code where we can test our function in our linked list project, and we can test different examples after I show you how to add this function to the linked list project. And for reversing our linked list, we'll continue with our project files, and in the linked list.h file, the header file, will define the reverse linked list file, the reverse linked list function, which would reverse a linked list. Now in the public section, we want to create a void function called reverse linked list, which will be the function we'll call when we want to reverse a linked list. And in the private section of the class, we will create another function, a void function called reverse linked list 1. This function will take in a node pointer as an argument. Now to actually define these functions, we'll go to the linked list.cpp file. Now for reversing linked list, we will call the function from the linked list.h file, the reverse linked list function, and this function will only call another function, the function reverse linked list 1, passing in the head node pointer of the linked list. And now in defining the reverse linked list 1 function, which takes in an integer in a node pointer, we will create the function that would reverse the linked list. For this function, we want to create a node pointer called the car pointer, and another pointer called for the previous pointer. We will set it equal to null, and finally a next node pointer. So while the current pointer is not equal to null, we want to do something in our while loop, and we'll set the next pointer equal to the current pointer's next pointer, and we want to set the current pointer's next pointer to the previous pointer, and we want to update the previous pointer to be equal to the current pointer, and then set the current pointer equal to the next pointer, and then finally set the head pointer equal to the previous pointer, which will be pointing to the new head node. And finally, we want to print out the linked list, the resulting linked list. So we want to comment out the few functions we ran in the previous videos, and we want to see out the statement reversing linked list before we actually call the reverse linked list on our function on our linked list. And so we'll call the function and compile the code in our terminal, and then we get the output, and we don't get the output, which means we've made a mistake in our function. So we need to go back and check where we made a mistake in the reverse linked list, and we forgot to set the current pointer equal to the pointer PTR, because that's where the current pointer will start. So now we check our function again, and if we compile the code and run the executable file, we get the reversed linked list as expected. And now that we have a function to reverse a linked list, we can move on to a few additional functions that will help us to get some functionality in our linked list in the next video. Please take just only 10 seconds to click the subscribe button and the bell next to it, because it helps me to grow this channel, and you won't miss any videos that might help you in the near future. And if you found this video interesting, leave a like. Thanks for staying with me until now. You can support me by checking out my Patreon page. I'll leave the link in the description, and welcome to ACoreFundamentals.